What's up guys? I am back with another book video today for y'all that like the reading content that I do. I know there's only a few of you in here, but this video is for y'all. So this is actually going to be a little bit of a book review, kind of a book recap of some books that I've been reading for this year so far. I've only read about 3. I'm reading another book. I'm reading Beloved by Toni Morrison. It's really good right now, but it's a little bit hard to get through because of the subject matter, so I'm taking my time with that one. I don't really have like a strict deadline about reading books. I just read for the enjoyment, and sometimes I need to take breaks from reading, and so I do that, but I always come back to reading eventually. And I just love the education that it gives me, the perspectives that it gives me, and just reading other authors' voices. It's very interesting and beautiful to do. So I have 3 books to share with you. It is The Perks of Being a Wallflower and Little Fires Everywhere, as well as Pride and Prejudice. And I read these books a while ago, so I'll try to remember a lot of things about them, but I might not remember everything, so forgive me if I'm like mixing up some things, mixing up names or other things like that. So the first book that I will talk about is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This was a reread for me. I read it a long time ago in, I think, middle school or high school, and I remember really loving it. I actually wrote a little paper about it. I don't remember what it was about. It was in high school or something, but I remember really loving the book, and so I wanted to reread it just to give that nostalgic feel and see if I still really loved it. And I do love the book. I think it's just a little bit outdated for me personally, because I'm not in high school or middle school anymore, and I don't have like a lot of relatability to the book, and I've read a lot more YA since then, and I think that like compared to the YA that's out now, it's a little bit underdeveloped for me, so I'll go into it. So Perks of Being a Wallflower is by Stephen Chbosky. I think that's how you say his name. I think reading it back then when it was released was something very special. I think a lot of people connected to it, mostly a lot of teens at the time like me, and I think that because it came out at the time that it did, it was very influential at the time, kind of like how Catcher of the Rye was very influential for its time. As time passes, a lot more ideas come out, and it's just a little bit cheesy for me, I would say, to reread. I think it is also because I'm 23 years old now and not a teenager, so I don't really relate to Charlie anymore, and also his friends. I think it's like, yeah, it's like they're a lot more mature than I was in high school and a lot of people that I knew in high school, but it's also like I can tell that an older person was writing in the perspective of a child. But I do love how the author tries his best to imitate like the writing style of a high schooler, because you can tell from like the beginning of the story how Charlie's voice and his writing has improved throughout the novel, because he is getting older and he's learning more literary techniques as well. I think that's really smart, and I think it's really funny as well. And in the story, it does have a lot of stereotypes, and you could say some of them are kind of negative with the way that they talk about like sexuality, and as well as people of color. There's not a lot of people of color in this book, as well as the movie, and the movie doesn't portray this, but there are some instances in the book where they do talk about people of color, but it's in a very negative and derogatory way, where say Charlie will talk about his grandpa, who is extremely racist and extremely like outdated. He's like an old white man, like most old white men who lived during segregation, and a lot of those people are still very racist and do not like understand, and so he talks about that, but that's the only mention of a lot of people of color in this book. The rest of the people are white, and even his whole friend group is technically white, like they're described as white people. And so it's just like very like, okay, like you could have left the racism out. You just didn't want to talk about people of color. Because I know a lot of white authors who don't feel comfortable about having POC characters because they don't know how to write from that perspective, which I totally understand and I totally agree with. If you don't want to write about the perspective of a person of color because you don't understand that and you don't want to do the research, then you do not have to. But why include a white character who is racist towards POC and then not have any POC in your book, you know? So in that way, I think it's a little bit outdated, as well as Patrick's relationship with I think Brad is his name. It's talking about how a lot of gay people are closeted and will get into these abusive relationships with other closeted men, because I think for Patrick, he's a little bit more open about his sexuality, but Brad is not at all and doesn't want to be seen next to him. And this was written for, I think, the 90s, and so I get it. It was not easy being gay then, and it's not easy being gay now, but it's a little bit more acceptable. But I still think it's like a trope of like, you know, like getting beaten up by your partner who is closeted. And I think they could have handled Brad's character a little bit better in that way. So I rated it a 3 out of 5. 4, I think I would have rated it a 4 out of 5 because I enjoy the writing a lot and I enjoy the subject matter and I enjoy all of the characters. But I really do have a problem with like this novel as well, like just some of the traumatic things, and then also with like the whole weird racism thing as well. Like I just didn't enjoy that. But the next book that I read, which is on like the total opposite spectrum of the first book, is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This novel blew my mind. Like it was so good. And where I had problems with Perks is where Celeste Ng solves these problems in this novel right here. And this is the best example of subtlety that works, you know, because there's some books that like are very subtle and it doesn't talk about anything and they think that they're talking about something, but this book actually talks about important issues in a very subtle way, which I really loved. This book is about two families who live in Shaker Heights. One of the moms is extremely by the books. She's a white lady. She's played by Reese Witherspoon in the show. She fits that role so perfectly. Like it's so crazy and bad how like perfectly she fits in there because she doesn't play the best character, and her family is like perfect. Her home is perfect. She follows the rules. Yeah, the other woman is a single mom and she's played by Kerry Washington, who's a beautiful lady, perfect for the role as well. And she lives more of a nomadic lifestyle because she's an artist and she doesn't play by the books. She lives like how she wants to live and she parents in a very different way. She only has one kid versus Elena, the white woman's character, who has 3 kids. No, 4. This was a really easy read for me. I read it very quickly. I wanted to savor it though because I loved the writing so much. If you've read anything from Celeste Ng, you know that her writing is like top notch, like so good. Very easy to follow as well. I thought the two conflicting characters were very interesting. I really had fun reading about their backstories as well, but I really loved the present story. The present story was what I gobbled up. You know, like the backstories were really fun to read about and to understand the character more, but the present story was like really fucking good. I also got, let's be honest, vibes from Mia, which it is confirmed in the show that she is bi or maybe just fully lesbian, but in the book it's much more subtle, which is what I was talking about with the queer codedness in this book. It's very subtle, but it also it's just shown in a way where it's not the front, like it's not like saying like, oh, he's gay, he's this, she's a lesbian, you know, where it's like pandering towards that. It's just like, oh, they might be, this is just part of their life and it's just a lifestyle. It's not always labeled, and I really love that. I also love Mia and Pearl's characters the most. Their dynamic was honestly like so good. Like this is a mother and daughter relationship. They had a lot of troubles, they had a lot of loving moments, they were very tender with each other, but also like not as understanding with each other, and it was just written perfectly. I also love the themes of motherhood and loss. There is like a part of the book where kind of controversy happens, and it has to do with race as well as motherhood, and I thought those themes were just done perfectly, as well as how the characters just like reflect off of each other, because like there's a huge thing happening in the book, like there's a trial happening in the book, but that's not the main point of the book. The main point of the book is how these characters react towards that major event, and it's so interesting to read, and it's such a new perspective that I'm just mind blown by Celeste Ng's just brain. Like, storytelling is her thing. That is her thing. Like, she nailed that. Professional. She's the Michael Jordan of writing. Like, that's it. So I really enjoyed that book. I rated it a 5 out of 5 because literally it's amazing. I can't tell you anything. It's amazing. And the last book is Pride and Prejudice. This is also a reread because I read this a long time ago in college as well for my British studies class, and it was kind of boring to me, but I love the movie. Okay, I know everyone loves the movie. I love the movie. Everyone loves the movie, but the book is very, very different. So every time I read it, I wouldn't get past the first 50 pages because I was just bored. I was just like, this is so boring. Like, this book is so freaking boring, and it's hard to read too because like it's really old. But this time I got past the first 100 pages and it was smooth sailing from there. I got used to the writing. I understood what Jane Austen was trying to do. I also saw that the story was moving along, like the romance was moving along, the plots were moving along. It just became more climactic for me. But overall, I love Pride and Prejudice. If you haven't read it yet, and you love reading classics, or you just love the movie, I would suggest reading it just because it gives a new perspective on the movie as well, because it is like, oh, the movie's a little bit more modern and a lot more cinematic. The book isn't as cinematic. Like, a lot of the talks happen in rooms rather than like nature, but I didn't mind that either. I just love how Elizabeth's character plays off of Mr. Darcy in the book more, because they have a lot more interactions, as well as like her own prejudice is explained more. Movie, the way that she turns from hating him to loving him is a little bit like cut, you know. It's like first you love him, then you hate him. But in the book it's much more gradual, and you can see how like her hatred was fueled by like kind of like a passion for him, where she did hate him, but I think it was concealed as like actually like admiration for him, but she just can't get past the things that she thinks that he's done. And so once she figures out he hasn't done anything of these things, she's just like, oh, actually, like, he's kind of my type, like, he's kind of hot, like. And then once I think she sees that how other people talk about Mr. Darcy, she's like, oh, like, you guys like Mr. Darcy? I think I'll like Mr. Darcy, which is kind of silly, but it is like, it is kind of like real life, like how you actually get to like a person. Like, I know so many people in relationships that are like, yeah, like, he was my friend before and I didn't find him attractive at all, but after he made me laugh, or like, you know, after a while, like, I saw other girls like wanting to be with him, I was like, oh, maybe I should like give it a chance. Because most of the times these guys are pining after the girl, and the girls just don't reciprocate that, because they just don't find the guys attractive, or they just don't know about their personality as well. And then once you kind of find out about their personality, or they make you laugh, or yada yada yada, you fall in love with them, which is like very, very real. I rated this one a 4.5 out of 5 because I think the first 100 pages are very necessary. I wouldn't like say that like you don't need to read the first 100 pages, because you do. It's a lot of backstory, and it's a lot of like personality traits, character traits that you need to read about. And as well as like, that's when Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy have all their problems in the beginning. I would suggest reading that, but I do wish that it was a little bit more interesting as the second half of the story, which is like perfect, chef's kiss, like amazing. So yeah, that's the only gripes I would have with that book. Yeah, I probably won't make one of these videos for a while because it takes me a while to read books. Like, it's taking me the whole month of February to read Beloved, and I've barely been halfway through it. So I think it'll move along, because once I get like a third way into a book, then I just read it within the day, because I'm like, well, I'm almost done, and then most of the time that's where the interesting stuff happens anyways. And I think the next book I'll pick out is a faster read for me. It'll be like a little bit of like maybe a graphic novel or something, so that I can really get through it fast and yeah, just have more books on my shelf that I've read already. Thank you so much. If you like these videos, please subscribe, please like these videos, and go ahead and watch my other videos as well. I have a couple other videos on my channel already, and my reading and movie videos don't get as much watches, so if you do watch this one, please go ahead and watch the other ones if you're interested, and I will see you next time. Thank you.